Chuck Randolph, welcome to the program. It's great to have you here, sir.
Yeah, good to be here, my friend. Anytime Batman calls, I guess you have to answer that call, right?
I thought you were Batman. I put up the bat signal yesterday, and so you're Batman in this particular case. You answered the call. I was in the Commissioner Gordon role, up on a rooftop, in dire need of someone with subject matter expertise on stalking, and who answers the call but the guru himself, Mr. Chuck Randolph.
I guess I'll say I am the knight. So, how are you doing, man? It's good to be here.
I'm really glad that you're here. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you have a lot going on with your own work and your own profession and your own family and everything like that. And it means a lot that you're willing to do this for me. Wanted to have a conversation with you about the issue of stalking. We saw what happened with the Kardashian clan last week. And then you actually had sent me that video yesterday of the domestic violence situation where the abuser was actually in the room while the restraining order process was ongoing. And kudos to that prosecutor for having the presence of mind to realize how wrong something was in that moment, and very likely saved that poor woman's life.
I mean, it was eerie when you realize, when you go and you watch that video and you see that prosecutor kind of have that moment where she realizes like, oh, the accuser is in the same apartment with the accused. There's a temporary restraining order. And then, you can find this on YouTube.
Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes if anyone hasn't seen it.
And it's eerie. I mean, it's well worth the watch just for training and for multiple reasons.
It is a textbook demonstration of knowing when something is wrong, and I'm sure that the prosecutor had a conversation with that survivor months before the stand, and then to have her just immediately, and then to even see the abusers, like his twitchiness, that he was almost like kind of like watching her from the side, and then the quick action of the judge telling him to go outside and prove where he was by showing the house number, and then his just ridiculous response, and then the police being able to intervene as quickly as they could, was just a real demonstration of how justice should work in our society.
I think when we were you and Chris and I were texting back and forth about this, and you pointed out, like, man, those police officers were there lickety split, and I'm gonna assume that prosecutor had the foresight to email somebody or something while she was there and say, we need to get some officers in that neighborhood just in case, because I think you're right. When the judge is like, go answer the door, you see let's call him the accused, kind of look off camera, and he knows what's about to go down.
Right. Yeah. You saw that, for the lack of a better, like, oh shit, the best laid plans of mice and men just went right out the window.
Well, Coursen, I think something that's interesting about all this is, you and I were talking the other day about, we've both been involved with luminaries, VIPs, and dealing with stalkers at high levels. I mean, the first chapter in your book, you kind of talk about stalking, and at least that's your initial foray example. And it's a great example, but stalking is not just limited to the rich and the famous, right?
Unfortunately, I would say it's of all of the incidents of stalking, I would say probably a very small percentage are of the high-ranking public figures. I think an overwhelming of the percentage of everyday stalking cases impact everyday people.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I was really hoping that you and I could sort of, one of the things I really like to do on this podcast is to provide the protective strategies that can help the audience to succeed in staying safe. And like I talk about in the book, not everyone is going to have the luxury of their own security detail, but everyone deserves to be protected. And so what I'm hoping that you and I, by the end of this conversation, is that we can have 5 key takeaways that those impacted by stalking concerns can put in their pocket so that they can prepare today for a safer tomorrow. Because, I mean, I think you're right. Not only is it not just the luminaries who have this stalking concern, but the type of concern that the luminaries face, I think, is also quite different.
Yeah.
Most stalkers, most inappropriate pursuers of public figures, I think the statistics are more than 80%, have some kind of a serious mental illness where they truly believe, whether that is because of like schizophrenia or delusion or what have you, that that person is either the Antichrist and must be killed, or that person was put on earth to be their one true love. And with every speech that they give, with every performance that they provide, those individuals believe that public figure is speaking directly to them in some kind of coded or cryptic way.
Well, something else to consider on that too is it's sometimes, I mean, if on the corporate side or if you're dealing with luminaries or dignitaries, it's a fine line between, hey, I need to sell you my widget, and now it's inappropriate. I mean, there's a point at which, and I've seen, you can sometimes almost see it where it crosses the line. Like you've gone from, I'm trying to sell you my cure for cancer, to now I'm just stalking you because I'm obsessed. So it is, there are some finer and different gray zones, especially with luminaries.
Yeah. And that's when we start getting into the realm of the inappropriateness of the pursuit.
Yeah.
Because and you and I have seen this, you're just walking a rope line and someone wants, someone to sign an autograph or sign a picture. And then they realize that they've been handed a stack of photos and they're like, oh, you didn't just want this one photo. You wanted me to sign 15 of them so that you can sell them on eBay. And you can say you're doing it for, whatever altruistic purpose you are, but we know it's all BS.
I was working the line once, and there was an actor, and, he's shaking hands, and all of a sudden the one guy grabs his hand and won't let go. And he's like, Moses. And then I realized, like, oh, you really think this guy is Moses because he portrayed Moses. And then it was at that moment of like, you could almost see it in his eyes where he kind of flipped around and he pulled out a Bible, wanted him to sign it. You didn't sign it as Moses. It got really kind of bizarre and strange at that point. But yeah, it's just, and you just don't know when it's going to make that line over from inappropriate to now you've entered the realm of stalker.
It's true. And then I think look, there was this case that was in Oklahoma this week where the individual was a former colleague. I'm assuming he was terminated because of some kind of workplace harassment, couldn't take no for an answer type thing. Then we see that he, or at least according to reports, was sitting outside of her house for, a month or so, was constantly leaving gifts at her door. And then her and her husband walk out the door one day, and this stalker gets out of his truck with a shotgun. Husband and wife hightail it back into their apartment building, but the stalker then puts a shotgun shell through the door, hits the husband in the hand, kicks the door down, grabs the former colleague, drags her back to the truck. Husband comes back out trying to defend, trying to rescue his wife. Suspect puts 2 shotgun blasts in the air. Here's the police coming because the neighbors at least had the wherewithal to call for help. He flees, and now we've got a police pursuit. Fortunately, they were able to detain the guy and have him arrested. But that's a very legitimate concern that could impact the everyday person because something was left unchecked. It was allowed to escalate. And I'm not saying that stalkers are being given permission to do what they're doing.
Right.
But the people who are being stalked must also realize that they need to participate in their own protection. And much like I talk about in chapter 1, just hoping that problem is going to resolve itself is not the best course of action. That's not the healthiest way to resolve that concern, because if we do not address today's concerns, we will be forced to confront tomorrow's crisis. And so
it's such a complex and eerie thing that you're dealing with. If you've ever had to deal with someone that is inappropriate or crosses the line and maybe like keys your car or follows you home, or I think in this case, when he was dragging her out, he threaten to kill her. If you don't come with me, I'm going to kill your husband.
Right.
And just, if you back that up, here now I have this guy leaving candy and gifts on my door. He, who knows what happened at work. I'll just let this go and maybe it'll go away. I mean, it's frightening in itself just to come to terms with having to deal with it.
And I want to give you credit. You brought this up earlier when we were chatting the other day. Maybe they feel like it's their fault, that they did something to lead this guy on, that they did something that they somehow in some way asked for this. And that's just not true.
Yeah.
These are people who are acting outside the realm of normal, behavioral norms. And it is so important for those who are being targeted by these predators that they understand that they didn't ask for this. This is not their fault. This is not something that they are responsible for. But what they are responsible for is taking part in their, participating in their own protection and not avoiding it and doing so if we're going to come up with a top 5 list, I would say that the first one is to say, hey, I have a stalker problem. Can someone help me? Just telling someone, just putting it out there to someone else that, hey, I have a problem and I need help. What do you think I should do?
There's an old, I think it's a Buddhist saying or something that says, if you name the demon, then you can deal with it. But if you don't, then it remains asymmetric, and you can't deal with it. But if you name it, like I have a problem, or I think I have a problem, sometimes just that first step of like acknowledgement opens the floodgates mentally to go do all these other things because you've given yourself permission. And it's hard, but yeah, it's definitely, it's you're a victim. You're not at fault.
Well, maybe that's step 1. It's give yourself permission to address the problem.
Yep.
Because I think you're right. I think that by not just being aware, I mean, I always talk about awareness plus preparation equals safety. But if you are avoiding the concern, then you're really blocking the awareness of that concern. But by naming the demon, like you said, by giving yourself that permission to protect yourself, I think that can be a very important first step.
You also take power away from it because at some point, you might have what's the old, hunters and howlers. Mm-hmm. So you have folks that are howling, and then the thing is they go quiet, and then maybe they become hunters, and then that becomes a bigger problem. So, and as we go through the other steps, I mean, just acknowledgement and then telling someone then leads to a bunch of other steps that will help you.
Absolutely. And I want to caveat this conversation at the onset by saying that even though we're going to be talking about 5 things that people can do to help keep themselves safe, to help stop stalkers, if at any time anyone does feel that their life is at risk or that they are in danger, 911 is always your first resort. You should
absolutely
at any time, for any reason that you feel that it is an emergency situation or that you're about to be injured or that you are in fear for your life, call 911. That is what it is there for.
Well, you even talk about it. I think it's in chapter 1 of the Safety Trap, Spencer, this idea of like gut instinct versus anxiety. And, that the whole, the nervous system that literally the gut instinct goes from the nerve that goes all the way from the brain, all the way down the leg and through your guts, so to speak. So there is something to be said for a gut instinct, but I think it's important to also as you say in the book, separate that from anxiety. But if in doubt, call 911, get help.
Absolutely. And then moving on from there, I mean, there are degrees of inappropriate pursuit. I mean, I think it's very rare. I mean, I don't want to say that at all. It's not uncommon so I think that we need to identify the divide between personal and the impersonal.
Right. Between
the people you and I have a personal relationship. Joe Rogan and I do not have a personal relationship. That is an impersonal dynamic. Joe Rogan speaks to millions of people every week. Millions of people know who Joe Rogan is. Joe Rogan has no clue who Spencer Coursen is. So if I have a grievance against Joe Rogan and I start, harassing, which would be a very stupid thing for me to do, that would be an impersonal dynamic, which is very different than if it's a colleague or a former intimate partner or someone who knows me from Starbucks or knows me from the gym or who used to walk my dog or what have you. And so I think identifying the dynamics of that relationship at the onset are also important, because ultimately what you're going to need to do, which is what I would say is step 2, is start documenting everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say you and I were talking about this before, but a long time ago when I got into security in the mid 90s and started doing threat assessment, threat management, first thing I'd do to folks, and we did a lot of volunteer time, is give them a binder. And that was pre Apple phone or Samsung phone or whatever, where you could take notes. But if you feel that you're a victim of something like that, you need to document time, date, and just a short synopsis of what was said. Even if you're like, and I've heard this a lot. No, it's fine. No, it's not fine. You can always get rid of the notebook if you find that, it was just inappropriate and it went away. But at the end of the day, if you have to go talk to, as we get further in the list, if you have to go talk to somebody, say a detective or a social worker, or say you go somebody to like a Spencer or a Chuck and say, hey, I think I'm having a problem, they're going to ask for that. What do you have? What have you documented?
Absolutely. Because if you do have to call the police because, what you don't want to have happen, and I don't know if this was the case in Oklahoma, but if they're just calling up the cops one day and saying, hey, there's someone in a truck outside of my house, and that's all the cops have to go on, that there's really nothing there. But if you can explain to the police and provide them with a document that demonstrates a clear pattern in practice, that over time and space and distance, it started with, we used to work together. Then he kept asking me out and I kept saying no. Then he was ultimately forced to leave. Then he started sitting outside of my house. Then he started sending me gifts by mail. Then he started leaving those gifts in person. Now he's sitting outside of my house. Those are all patterns of behavior that are outside the realms of normal operating, normality, and are a clear and obvious decision by that perpetrator to act in a very clear and intentional manner that is either threatening of harm or is intended to cause fear of harm. And that is the underlying legal classification of stalking.
It shows the pattern, because someone, did it happen once or twice? No, this happened 15 times over the last month. My phone is ringing. I think, the idea of hey, I'm just going to block this person's number off my phone. Well, you may not want to do that because you may want to keep that log of the 25 times a person has called you or sent you a text. It's unnerving, but I go back to number 1, give yourself permission and acknowledge the issue or acknowledge the demon, and now start taking power away from it and start taking, action in your own hands to protect yourself.
100%. And it's very, Robert Greene talks about this in the 48 Laws of Power, but it's one of the things I always equate it back to is, when you're in high school and the girl breaks your heart and you call her 10 times and then she answers on the 11th, all you've done is reframe the expectation of how many times that person is going to have to call. But the more they call and the more they don't answer and the more you don't answer, the more power you are taking away from them. Because ultimately what they're trying to do is bait you into a response. We see this with all kinds of bad breakups and what have you. But the other thing is that by not blocking, when you block the number, not only are you not able to document the calls and the texts or whatever other communications may come through, and I mean this across the board. Social media, don't block them, don't block their phone numbers. And I know that it may be counterintuitive and you may want to avoid that anxiety, but I'm telling you, by not blocking that, you are truly taking the power back. Because what you don't want to do is have it turn into a game of cat and mouse where they're now going out and changing up their phone numbers or getting burner phones or getting Google Voice numbers. And now instead of having one phone number that we know is directly tied to the identity of this individual, now we may have 15 things coming in, and that's going to make it much more difficult to prove your case. So
Yeah,
documenting
absolutely.
everything with as much detail and with as much,
it's not fun. If you're a victim of stalking and like, gosh, I need to sit down, I need to write what this person said to me on the phone, or I need to document this email or print it out or do something. And now it feels like it's another task, but every time you do it, just understanding that like I'm building the pattern and I'm building the case for my own protection. Should this go something that I need to go talk to somebody else about, or take it to the next level, or get a temporary restraining order? People are affected by different things. Some people they get a temporary restraining order against them. They're like, I don't want to mess with the law. Other people may not care about that, but I think that kind of leads into the next thing that we would suggest is like knowing when to seek additional help.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think 3 and 4 should kind of like almost happen in concert, because I think 3 is to get additional help and 4 is to reduce your vulnerability. So, and so let's just ask for additional help. It is very likely that most people do not have in their contact logs a Jason Bourne, an Ethan Hunt, a Chuck Randolph, a Spencer Coursen. But what they do have is Google. And what they can Google is local stalking assistance or stalking support group or stop stalk. I mean, we'll put all of the outlets and organizations and child labor enterprises in the show notes. Those people have professional partnerships with people like me, with people like you, with people in our profession. And what people in our profession often do is provide those services, if not pro bono, at a significantly reduced rate, because our job as protectors is to help those in need. One of the core foundations of my business philosophy is to help good people make bad things better. I do a lot of work with domestic violence organizations. I do a lot of work with stalking organizations. So just because you don't know who to turn to for help doesn't mean you can't employ a power partner who does. And so I think
absolutely.
That's it.
And I think you make a great point that if you feel that you need to document, you should probably engage someone, whether it's, like someone you can find from Google or Bing or whatever search engine you're using, and then just call and say, I think I have a problem. I'm going to start documenting, because you've also, in some sense, you've also put some alert on somebody like, hey, I've alerted you, I'm going to do these things. Maybe we can touch base, weekly and see where it's going and whatnot. So I agree. And there's plenty of folks out there that will render assistance. You don't need to be a multi-billionaire to get assistance, because there's plenty of folks out there that are doing support for those billionaires that are also saying, hey, it's important enough, and this issue is important enough that we devoting time to help,
Absolutely.
Joe and Jane Sixpack, because we need it as much as everybody else.
Yes.
Maybe even more.
Yeah. Just because you don't know who the helpers are does not mean that the help is not out there and available to you and willing to support you in your effort. So, but you have to ask for the help. If you don't ask for the help can't find you. You have to ask for the help.
Yep. Absolutely.
And then, so, 3/4, reducing your vulnerability. And part of that is auditing yourself with honesty, not overly promoting on social media what you're going to be doing, not telegraphing your movements, not, being, just taking honest stock of what's going on. But it's also letting the gatekeepers at your work know. It's letting the people at your gym know. It's letting the people who are responsible for either access control or safety or security or any kind of, parking attendants at your work, front desk people, delivery people, gym people. If you have a front desk at your apartment building, or even just like your own like Ring cameras or security cameras at your house, you have to audit all of that with honesty.
You make a great point, and it's worth emphasizing. If you're working for a corporation, big or small, they have some type of risk or security or safety or HR and you should let them know. All that will always be in confidence, but you should alert them, because, and there's been some cases where people have shown up at employers' work and then gotten by the gatekeeper and then gone on in and done something very unfortunate, and it's caused loss of life or loss of limb. And one way to prevent that is, like you say, take stock in what you're doing and make sure that you alert those functions, so that at least when you're in your bubble doing your things, you've alerted people to the problem and they can help you.
I talk in chapter 4 of my book. I talk about the safety trap of expectation, and thinking that, oh, I see all of these. I see the guards. I see the cameras. I see the front desk. I see the check-ins. Oh, this is a very secure building. And what had happened was this husband and wife were going through a very tumultuous divorce, and they had separated, and the wife had stopped answering the texts and emails of her husband, and he drove by the house one night and she wasn't there. And so now he's even more exacerbated. And where was the one place that he knew that she would be 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, was at work. And so he comes walking into the office like he's done 100 times before, waves to the security guard, hops up in the elevator, and no one knew the difference until he locked the door of her office behind him. And so you have to, it sucks that people have to experience this kind of real world risk, but the solutions are out there. And it sucks to get food poisoning, but there's a response to it. It sucks to get COVID, but there's a cure for it. It sucks to get the fever, but there's a cure for it. No one asks to get these things or to have these things happen to them, but accepting that they are happening and taking the necessary steps to make that bad thing better is not only in your own best interest for empowering your own life, but for not living with that anxiety for the days, weeks, months, years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, you don't want to be time, place predictable, but there's times that it is. I mean, it's interesting, as we talked about the case with the domestic violence accuser and the victim up in Sturgis, Michigan, and, the prosecutor seeing all that. I mean, we live in weird, interesting, tumultuous times, and whatever you can do to take stock and assessment of your own place in that tumultuous, in the environment, and what you can do to change it helps you.
And I'm also a little bit worried about how stunted a great number of us may have been in how to interact socially. I mean, you see this when people go away to prison, or they're put in solitaire, or they're in the middle. I mean, there is almost like an institutionalization that takes place. Like, do you remember like how anxious and full of just unease everyone was when the quarantine first started and everyone was forced to socially distance, and Zoom became the new way we were all communicating, and remote work and what have you. We're all going to start going back to the way things used to be, and we're all going to have to relearn some very perishable skills about normal societal interaction, and not being able to microdose on rosé all day, and whatever everyone has been doing, like not having to wear pants because you are only going to see me from the waist up on Zoom. Right. And I think there's going to be a lot of stressors in that environment where the things you could get away with on a text message or a Slack chat is going to be completely different in the face-to-face interpersonal dynamic.
Totally agree. And think of mental illness, and, people who maybe that is exacerbated while they were at home during the pandemic. And now your work says, hey, you've got to come back and go back to work. And maybe there's some fixation that they lost that suddenly will come back. And I mean, we stressed one way, and then we kind of figured that way out. And now we're going to have to go back to either completely the way it was, but more likely some hybrid type of activity. And it's just going to make it difficult. Yeah.
And I am by no means saying this to stigmatize mental health, but what we are talking about is those with serious mental illness who may have lost their jobs, who may have lost their ability to see professional to seek professional counseling, who may not be, have had their meds in a year, who may have, I think the unintended consequences of us being isolated for so long, I don't know that we've fully realized the full scope, the full level, the full degree of impact that has had on a society which is by our very nature intended to be seen, to see, to interact, to be interpersonal, and to have that taken away, and then to almost overnight have it reintegrated it is not, to think it's going to come without challenge would be a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's something we'll work through. It's something if you're dealing with something like we've been talking about with stalking, you go back to work and it gets worse or it gets exacerbated or something. I mean, I think, go back through the checklist again and notify folks, document, name it what it is. Don't feel guilty about it. And in worst case scenario, you feel it, call 911.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a good segue into number 5, which would be, at a certain point, there's going to have to be a decision point. And either the stalking situation will have resolved itself because, and let's be honest, regardless of circumstance or scenario, the number one most influential factor of target selection is likelihood of success. And most stalkers will, if they can't get to you, they're going to transfer to someone who is more likely to reciprocate either their interest or who they know that they can actually access. They can stage a confrontation. They can do that. So if in your reducing your vulnerability, you have all but negated that act, it's very likely that that person will transition away from you and onto someone else. But if they don't, that is the time to file charges, to get a temporary restraining order, and you're going to take that file with all of those documents, and you're going to have the reports that are provided to you by those whose help you have sought, and you are going to have a very compelling case to present to a legal advocate for your concern.
It's important, Spencer, for folks to know, what do we know about getting in the mind of a stalker? What we really know is nothing. I mean, I know there's plenty of people out there right now going, oh, that's BS. I wrote this book. I wrote this paper. But reality is we can't make those predictions. We can assess and we can predict. We can't forecast. It's,
right.
At some level, we just don't know. So trying to understand or trying to talk yourself into everything will be fine. I think I understand him. You're right. There's a point where there's a decision. It's enough is enough. I mean, I've done, Spencer, I've done the steps. I'm at a point. I need my life. I need to do something, and I need that legal assistance to step in and help set up some parameters and boundaries.
I think I heard this on your podcast, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they were talking about how assessing risk and predicting risk is kind of very similar to how a doctor assesses that you have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and that you're at risk of a heart attack. But the doctor can't tell you, hey, at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, you're going to have a heart attack.
Exactly.
And threat assessment and threat management is a very similar passion. We can take the pattern in practice that this predator has been displaying of inappropriate pursuit, and we can demonstrate with near certainty that if left unchecked, this is going to end in harmful consequence.
Right.
But what we can't do is say it's going to happen on Wednesday at 10 a.m.
That's the thing. Exactly. I think most people think well, tell me when and this, and the thing is we can't. We can say 80% of these have resulted in this result or this output or something, but this 1% might be different. And as you say, I mean, it could be today, it could be tomorrow. And that's not us trying to scare anybody. It's just kind of the reality of the situation. I mean,
and kudos. Please.
I mean, you can, like you said, you can assess kind of you can forecast the way these certain things play out.
Right.
You can have, you can have folks look at it and give an assessment to that. But I think it's very important to underscore, like you said, but you can't name that day at that time. You need to be prepared. You need to have done these things, because at 2 p.m. on, April 21st, this is probably going to happen.
Mm-hmm. And
you just don't know.
Yeah. And kudos to the legislators and the police departments and the district attorney's offices. 10 years ago, if you called up local police and said, hey, this guy's threatening me on Twitter, the cop may have actually said, what's Twitter? But today they have the wherewithal, they have the training, they have the intelligence, they have the background to say, okay, well, he's been stalking you on, you're being cyber stalked. Do you know this part? They're going to start asking questions that may try to get you to reveal the pattern in practice that you may not have known you needed to demonstrate to them, so that they can do their job more effectively.
There's a great bipartisan bill out there. It's the TAPS Act. I don't know if you've heard of it, the Threat Assessment, Prevention, and Safety. And kudos to those legislators for coming in and saying, look, we want to develop something that would mandate behavioral threat assessment and management across the federal government. And then it gives grants to states to implement it as well. And also there's a way in it to include folks not in the government, whether state or federal, that can be involved. And then, it's the ability for us to now start having frameworks that could be recognized in all the states. I mean, you're right. The legislation has come a long way, even since I've been in the security business since the mid 90s. I mean,
do you know Laura Richards?
Yes.
Met her at CrimeCon last year. The work that she is putting forth in terms of stalking legislation is just phenomenal. If you're shout out to CrimeCon, if you're going to be in Austin this June 4th through 6th, CrimeCon is going to be hosted in Austin, Texas this year. I'm pretty sure that Laura is going to be here again. She did a great presentation last year that was just a chart.
Spencer, for folks listening in that are maybe curious about threat assessment and all things in that realm, I mean, if you go out to the Association of Threat Assessment Professionals, ATAP, and I get nothing for this, you get nothing for this, other than it's a great organization. And if you go back to get some help, that would be a great way to maybe find somebody in your area that might be able to give you some guidance or some assistance. And that's
a really good, we should put that in the show notes as well, the local ATAP chapter, because that's a whole conglomerate of guys looking to help good people make bad things, guys and women, men and women. Sorry, I'm using the term in the however I'm supposed to use it.
It's good. We all get it.
And I think another great resource for people to learn about protectors and the protector mindset is your own Conversations in Close Protection podcast that you do with Chris Story. I was very fortunate enough to be on or invited on, I guess it was two weeks ago, to promote the safety trap. And I have been, I think that was actually one of our initial introductions was your podcast. And so that is another great resource. And then there's also the Protector, it's in December. I'm sorry, the name of the event, the Close Protection Conference, for any fellow protectors who are interested. I'm sure, let me put it this way. Anyone who's listening to this, it's already a protector, is going to be there in December. So I don't know if we need to,
well, it's going to be a great time. And I think there's the discussion as we start putting the package together for presentations and panels around stalking and issues that we've seen over the pandemic, for that. Yeah. And I appreciate that, on the podcast as well, my friend.
Absolutely. So I just want to recap and then we'll get you out of here on this. So we have the top 5 on the first, number 1, just take back your power, give a name to the demon, give yourself permission to participate in your own protection, and just understand that you have a concern that needs to be resolved so that it does not escalate into crisis. Number 2, document. Don't block. Don't turn this into a game of cat and mouse, but anything and everything that may pop into your mind about this particular concern should be written down. Screenshot things, leave voice notes, what have you. These are anything that you can possibly think, write it out as a narrative, give backstory. The more info you can put onto paper, the more evidence that you can enter into your court of concern, the better you will be. Number 3, ask for help. The help will find you if you ask for the help, but the help cannot find you if you do not ask for it. Number 4, recruit local assets, reduce your vulnerability, do what you can to participate in your own protection by being proactive, having that healthy sense of skepticism, that moderate dose of vigilance, so that you can help prepare today for a safer tomorrow. And number 5, if the problem hasn't resolved itself, it's time to, take things to the next level. And that may mean prosecution, that may mean a temporary restraining order, that may mean taking things to whatever those who you have asked for help recommend that you do, and following their sage advice. Am I leaving anything else,
Awesome. Sir? Nope. I guess the other thing too is, to underscore, like, don't feel guilty. It is not your fault.
100%.
Don't let guilt prevent you from doing the right thing to protect yourself. And don't forget your family and your friends, because they are also involved in this.
Chuck, you're on LinkedIn. Where else? You're on the socials. What people who want to learn more about you and the work you're doing, where can they find you?
They can Google me and find me. Conversations in Close Protection you can find it on all your podcast platforms. We're on Instagram. You can find us there. LinkedIn. You can find me, Chuck Randolph, at LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to get in touch with me. Or if you go to the At Risk International website, they've got a way that you can get a hold of me there as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And At Risk, started by Chuck Tobin, a legend in the threat assessment space. Great company. Can't recommend it.
Charles Tobin. The Charles Tobin. Absolutely.
Oh, Charles Tobin. I'm sorry. What did I say?
No, it's Chuck Tobin.
Okay. Yeah.
There's 2 Chucks, so you always have to figure out.
Right.
Gets there first.
Hey, Mr. Randolph, thank you very much. I appreciate you.
Anytime, my friend. I appreciate you too. Thanks for all the work you're doing. And quick shout out for the safety trap. I did shameless plug, and you didn't ask me to do it. I did get the book. It's great. I look forward to it coming out, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate you. All right, man. Talk soon. Cheers.